On today's story here on USA Celeb, we're taking a closer and calmer look at the situation surrounding NFL player Stefon Diggs, because things have taken a surprising turn that most people did not expect. It all began when Stefon Diggs filed a lawsuit against a man who made serious allegations about him online. Now, depending on who you speak with, the story sounds different from every angle, and that's exactly why so many people across the country are trying to make sense of what really happened and what didn't. The allegations were shocking enough to grab immediate attention, but the lawsuit itself is what truly set everything into motion. Because once something is taken to court, it's no longer just internet rumors or passing conversation. It becomes something that must be addressed, documented, and eventually resolved, one way or another. To understand why this story grew so quickly, you have to look back to the man who made the claims. He originally presented himself as someone close to Stefon Diggs, and depending on which version of his statements you read, he either called himself a stylist, a creative assistant, or simply someone in Stefon's social circle. Over time, however, the description shifted, which raised a lot of eyebrows among people trying to track the truth. That inconsistency is part of what encouraged Stefon to respond legally, because according to him, the man wasn't a trusted professional, wasn't a stylist, and wasn't someone who worked with him. In Stefon's version of events, this individual was just a social media influencer he met briefly, someone who exaggerated their connection for personal attention. The lawsuit claims that this influencer posted several alarming accusations on social platforms, accusations that Stefon says were not only false, but deeply damaging to his name and to the image he has tried to maintain throughout his career. When stories like this start spreading online, they move quickly, sometimes faster than the truth can catch up. And when you're talking about someone in the public eye, especially a well-known athlete, even a small rumor can echo loudly across the internet. Stefon, according to the legal filing, felt the accusations were so serious and so harmful that he had no choice but to push back publicly in the courts instead of letting it drift unchecked across social media. Many older viewers here at USA Celeb may remember a time when rumors had a slower pace, when news traveled through newspapers and television rather than instant posts and viral videos. But today, anything can catch fire in a matter of hours, spreading to thousands or even millions of people before the original source has a chance to clarify anything at all. That's part of what happened here. The accusations appeared suddenly, and within hours, people across the country were sharing their opinions about whether the story sounded believable, whether the man making the claims seemed trustworthy, and whether Stefon Diggs might be facing serious trouble. It became a national topic almost overnight. Now, what made the situation even more complicated was the fact that Stefon Diggs recently welcomed a child. And as with any new parent, there is already a spotlight on what that means for his personal life. To add to that, his name has been repeatedly linked with Cardi B, sparking speculation about whether they have become a new couple or whether they're simply supportive friends navigating the world of fame together. For many people, especially those who enjoy following celebrity relationships, this added a whole new angle to the situation. The idea of a potential power couple always attracts attention, but when a scandal or allegation appears at the same time, the spotlight grows even brighter. Throughout all this, some fans pointed out that Cardi B has always been extremely active online and very quick to defend herself or anyone close to her. People wondered whether her influence might be affecting how Stefon handled the situation. Not in a negative way, but in a way that encouraged him to respond strongly rather than stay silent. Others wondered whether the timing of the allegations, appearing so close to the birth of Stefon's child and the rumors of his romantic life, might have encouraged him even more to protect his image, his family, and his future. But beyond the gossip and speculation, the lawsuit is what really grounds this story in something concrete. According to court documents, the events in question go back to May of 2023, when Stefon Diggs attended a charity basketball game in Washington, D.C. After the game, he and a group of influencers, including the man now involved in the lawsuit, went out to a local club before eventually going back to Stefon's home in Rockville, Maryland. So far, that part of the story is something both sides seem to agree on. But from that point forward, their accounts split into two completely different narratives. Stefon says that after returning home, he simply went to his bedroom to call it a night, leaving his assistants to manage who stayed and who left. According to him, his assistant asked the man to leave the house, and the night ended uneventfully. The influencer tells a completely different story, one involving drugging, inappropriate behavior, and a later incident that he claims involved threats and intimidation. These are heavy claims that would be incredibly serious if proven true. But that's exactly why Stefon says he felt compelled to act legally. He insists none of it happened, and he believes the man made everything up to gain online attention and boost his social media following. The lawsuit states that the influencer posted these accusations publicly, tagging not only Stefon Diggs but also his NFL team and even the brand Uggs, with which Stefon has a sponsorship. That part caught many people by surprise. To tag a major sports team and a sponsor implies the man wanted the story to reach the widest possible audience and potentially disrupt Stefon's career or business relationships. For many observers, that raises questions. Was the influencer seeking justice, or was he seeking publicity? Was he motivated by truth or by personal gain? These are the questions that will now be addressed in a courtroom where each side will have to present evidence, not just claims. Stefon's attorneys describe the statements as pure fiction. The influencer's attorney says his client is prepared to prove every word in court. And that is where the story becomes something larger than online conversation. It becomes a legal battle that must be resolved through evidence, testimony, and cross-examination. For viewers here on USA Celeb, especially those in the older generation who appreciate clarity and caution, this part is important. No one can declare guilt or innocence based solely on online posts. And while people may have their suspicions or instincts, the only place this can truly be sorted out is before a judge. Another layer to this story, and one that older audiences often understand deeply, is the idea of reputation. When you've worked for years to build a name, whether in sports, business, or everyday life, any rumor or false claim can create real damage. Even if proven false later, the shadow can linger. That's why many believe Stefon Diggs chose to sue. Not only to push back on something he says is untrue, but to firmly draw a line to protect his name, his job, and the people around him. In the world of modern celebrity culture, the internet can be both a blessing and a burden, and in this case, it's the burden that brought the story into the public eye. As this situation unfolds, many people, including longtime football fans, are watching closely. Some are sympathetic to Stefon, believing he is the victim of a harmful lie. Others are unsure, feeling that the story needs to be heard in full before anyone makes a final judgment. And some believe the influencer may have experienced something real, and is simply seeking justice through the only outlet he felt he had. The complexity of this case is exactly why it has captured nationwide attention, crossing age groups and interests alike. As this situation continued to develop, more people began looking closely at Stefon Diggs' decision to take legal action, because it revealed something deeper about how serious the matter had become behind the scenes. When a celebrity files a lawsuit, especially one involving damage to reputation, it is rarely done on impulse. It typically means that attorneys have reviewed the claims, examined the public posts, and concluded that the accusations pose a significant long-term threat to the individual's career and personal life. In Stefon's case, his team made it clear that they believed these allegations had crossed a line, one that could not be ignored or brushed aside. What makes moments like this so important is that they signal intent. Stefon wasn't just responding to a rumor. He was taking a firm stand and telling the world that the story did not match reality, at least not in the way it was described by the influencer. This move alone captured the attention of not only fans but also media outlets, legal analysts, and even organizations connected to the NFL. On USA Celeb, many of our older viewers understand the weight of personal reputation better than anyone. You've lived long enough to see how one misunderstanding or false allegation can carry consequences far beyond the moment. And that's why the tone around this story shifted from online gossip to something much more serious. The fact that the influencer tagged Stefon's team, his sponsors, and major sports organizations was viewed by many as an escalation. It suggested an intention to inflict maximum visibility and impact, something that courts take seriously when reviewing motive. Reputational harm is not always about money. It's about long-term trust and credibility. And for someone like Stefon Diggs, whose career relies heavily on public image, endorsements, and fan loyalty, reputational threats can be just as damaging as physical injuries. Some people questioned why Stefon didn't simply remain quiet and allow the story to fade away on its own. But that option is far more complicated than it appears. Silence can be interpreted in countless ways, especially in the world of online commentary. Critics might assume silence means guilt, while supporters might believe silence means dignity. But when serious accusations gather momentum, the risk of remaining silent becomes far greater than the risk of addressing the matter directly. Stefon's lawsuit, regardless of how it ultimately resolves, serves as a clear statement that he intends to confront the allegations head-on. For many watching the story unfold, the lawsuit was a reminder that even in a world flooded with digital voices, the courts still remain the final authority in determining truth. Another element of the situation that has drawn attention is the timeline. The alleged events took place back in 2023, but the influencer waited more than 2 years to post his claims online. That delay raised questions for a lot of observers who wondered why such serious accusations were not brought forward sooner if they were true. The influencer's side argues that he feared backlash, threats, or disbelief, and waited until he could gather the courage to speak. Stefon's side argues that the delay shows the story was created now to take advantage of Stefon's rising visibility. These conflicting explanations have only deepened the public's curiosity, because timing often plays a crucial role in unveiling motive. And in a case like this, where the two accounts differ so dramatically, every detail matters, especially for those preparing to argue in court. Throughout this period, Stefon Diggs has maintained a quiet public presence. He hasn't made emotional statements, hasn't posted long responses, and hasn't addressed the specifics of the allegations aside from what is written in the lawsuit. This approach contrasts sharply with the influencer, who has spoken publicly through social media, interviews, and online comments. That contrast has created two very different narratives, one grounded in legal documentation and the other in public conversation. Older audiences often appreciate the quieter path, the one that avoids additional chaos. But younger audiences tend to view public conversation as proof of transparency. This generational divide has shaped how different age groups respond to the story, and it highlights how complex narratives become when they cross demographic lines. While the lawsuit is the center of attention, there have also been quiet conversations about how the NFL might respond. Major sports organizations typically maintain strict expectations regarding the personal conduct of their players, especially when headlines begin to circulate. Even if the allegations are unproven, the NFL often monitors such situations to ensure they remain prepared if further action is needed. So far, the league has not released an official statement, likely because they prefer to wait for confirmed legal developments before involving themselves. Sponsors, on the other hand, tend to be more sensitive to controversy. Though none have made public announcements, Stefon's legal team emphasized that tagging sponsors in the influencer's posts could have undermined future business opportunities, strengthening the argument for reputational harm. Meanwhile, the general public remains divided. Some believe the influencer must have experienced something significant to speak out so boldly. Others argue that Stefon is being unfairly dragged into an internet narrative created to attract attention. The online world thrives on controversy, and platforms often benefit from stories that stir reaction. But at the heart of it all, two individuals are facing the consequences of a story that now lies in the hands of the judicial system. And for viewers who value fairness, patience, and truth that comes with evidence, not emotion, this is where the story becomes particularly important. The slow, careful process of legal review allows the truth to emerge gradually, without the pressure of public opinion overshadowing facts. There is also the element of family. For Stefon Diggs, becoming a new father adds emotional weight to the situation. When children come into someone's life, priorities shift. Protecting their future becomes essential. For anyone in that position, the idea of online rumors shaping how your child may someday view you becomes a powerful motivator. Many longtime viewers wrote in expressing empathy for that part of the story, because parents of all ages understand the instinct to shield their children from unnecessary turmoil. Whether or not the allegations hold any truth, the presence of a newborn in Stefon's life undoubtedly influenced how seriously he approached the matter. Another dimension is the speculation surrounding his rumored romantic connections. Whether or not Stefon and Cardi B are truly building a relationship, the public perception of them as a potential couple has added a layer of pressure. When people believe two celebrities are aligning themselves as a powerful pair, expectations rise. Public scrutiny intensifies, and stories that would normally fade away quickly instead attract extended attention. Fans of both Stefon and Cardi are deeply invested in their public appearances and interactions, and for some people, the lawsuit complicates that narrative. A public figure seeking to maintain or improve their image while navigating relationship rumors will always face heightened judgment. Even so, while the connection to Cardi B generates headlines, the core of the lawsuit remains separate from all relationship speculation. It is ultimately about whether the influencer's statements are true or false, whether they were made maliciously or sincerely, and whether they caused measurable damage. These are legal questions, not emotional ones, and they will be handled accordingly. Many viewers here on USA CELEB appreciate stories that allow time, patience, and thoughtful explanation, and that is exactly what this case requires. As the weeks passed, attorneys on both sides prepared their strategies. Stefon's team focused on establishing inconsistencies in the influencer's story, the timeline of events, and the motivation behind the posts. The influencer's attorney prepared to argue that his client was not seeking attention but simply justice. For the public, these details may sometimes seem overwhelming, but they are essential for determining truth. Every document, every message, every witness, every timeline detail becomes part of the larger picture. And that picture is what the court must ultimately examine. For many older viewers, this story serves as a reminder that the digital age amplifies everything: accusations, responses, and consequences. A situation that would have once been addressed privately between two individuals can now turn into a national conversation within hours. And with that speed comes the need for wisdom, restraint, and careful decision-making. Stefon's lawsuit is not just about clearing his name. It is also about pushing back against the idea that online posts can shape a person's future without accountability. As the lawsuit moved closer to public visibility, the atmosphere around Stefon Diggs' situation began to shift. What started as a series of online posts had transformed into a full legal matter that required careful attention from everyone involved. For many fans following the story, especially our dedicated viewers here on USA Celeb, the next phase was not about choosing sides, but about watching how a complicated situation would unfold under the structure and discipline of the judicial system. In this phase, emotions take a step back and evidence begins to take center stage, because once two people lock their disagreement into a courtroom setting, everything they say must be backed with clarity, proof, and consistency. That is when a story stops being a trending topic and becomes a serious dispute with long-lasting consequences. Preparation for a case like this often requires gathering digital records, messages, witness accounts, security logs, and anything else that can establish what truly happened and what did not. Both sides knew the stakes were high. For Stefon, whose career is built on his athletic reputation, discipline, and reliability, the case represented far more than just personal pride. It was about making sure that the version of events circulating online did not become accepted as truth simply because of repetition. And for the influencer, the courtroom offered a chance to prove that his voice was not fabricated or exaggerated, but rooted in an experience he believed was real. When two stories stand so far apart that they barely share the same shape, the courtroom becomes the only place where clarity can be found. The public continued to speculate, but much of the commentary softened as people realized the seriousness of what was approaching. Older viewers especially understand that once lawyers step in, matters become less about loud opinions and more about documented facts. Stefon Diggs' team remained committed to the same message from the start, that the accusations were knowingly false, created for attention, and harmful to his image, his sponsorships, and his personal relationships. And although he maintained a mostly quiet stance, the lawsuit itself spoke loudly enough. Filing a case demands time, money, and commitment. It is not something done casually, and Stefon's willingness to proceed suggested he believed deeply that the accusations needed to be confronted in the strongest possible way. Meanwhile, the influencer and his attorney also stood firm. They insisted that what he shared online reflected his truth, and that the lawsuit was an attempt to silence him. He claimed he had waited to speak until he felt safe and supported, and that his intention was never to harm Stefon, but to bring attention to something he felt deserved acknowledgement. The challenge with such cases is that truth can often appear different depending on where someone stands. Each side may genuinely believe they are acting correctly, and only the slow, steady process of presenting evidence can narrow the gap between two opposing narratives. As preparations continued, the media began to cover the story with more formality than before. Instead of repeating speculation or reacting emotionally, many outlets shifted toward discussing upcoming court dates, statements from attorneys, and the legal strategies likely to be used. That shift in tone influenced the public too, calming the pace of online discussion. The dramatic speculation that spread early on gradually gave way to more measured curiosity about what the legal system would ultimately determine. Most people understand that accusations of this nature cannot be resolved through opinions alone. They require careful, structured evaluation. A significant aspect of the case involved Stefon's sponsorships and business partnerships. Companies that work with public figures typically rely on clean, trustworthy reputations. Allegations, even unproven ones, can raise concerns. That is why Stefon's legal team emphasized how much harm the influencer's posts could cause. Tagging the NFL, the Patriots, and UGS in the accusations was seen as a direct attempt to disrupt professional relationships. For anyone who has worked hard to build a career, the idea of losing opportunities because of claims they believe are false can feel deeply unfair. Many of our older viewers understand this feeling personally, having built reputations over decades in their own fields. Losing trust takes only a moment, and rebuilding it can take years. Another quiet but important factor was Stefon's personal life. Becoming a new father added weight to everything happening around him. When a parent's reputation is questioned, the fear is not only for themselves, but for how their children may someday interpret what happened. Even though his newborn child is far too young to understand any part of the story right now, the permanence of online information can make parents think years ahead. Many viewers with children and grandchildren connected with that part of the story on a deeper level. Protecting one's family from unnecessary harm, especially harm based on accusations, becomes an instinctive priority. The courtroom eventually set a date for preliminary discussions, and that announcement reignited public attention. Court schedules often move slowly, but even setting an initial date signals progress. It means both sides will soon have to present something concrete, whether statements, documents, or responses. That also means the public begins to prepare itself for a clearer picture of what happened and what did not. For many viewers, this stage is less dramatic but more important. It is where the truth begins to take shape, even if only in small ways at first. And because this case involves personal reputation, the stakes feel even higher. As the date approached, fans of Stefon Diggs wondered how the situation might impact his emotional well-being, his performance, and his relationships. High-pressure legal battles often weigh heavily on a person, especially when the outcome is unpredictable. Supporters encouraged him online, reminding him that truth has a way of surfacing in time. Those who believed the influencer also expressed support for him, insisting that speaking out was an act of courage. The divide did not come from hostility as much as uncertainty. People on both sides hoped for clarity, and many simply wanted to see fairness prevail. As usual, the entertainment and sports worlds reacted differently. In celebrity culture, dramatic narratives attract attention quickly, but they fade just as fast. In sports culture, reputational concerns linger longer because they can influence contracts, trades, and sponsorships. That difference in environment put Stefon at a crossroads. He could no longer rely solely on his performance on the field to shape his public portfolio. He now had to navigate a legal challenge that would test his resilience in a very different way. The blending of celebrity scrutiny and athlete responsibility made the situation uniquely complex. In the weeks leading up to the first court session, quiet negotiations were rumored, though nothing was confirmed. It is not unusual in cases like this for attorneys to explore the possibility of settlement before appearing publicly. Settlement does not necessarily mean guilt or innocence. It often means avoiding prolonged legal battles. But sometimes, when someone feels strongly about defending their name, they reject any option that appears to compromise their truth. And by all indications, Stefon's side seemed determined to see this process through, confident that transparency would ultimately support his version of events. The influencer's attorney expressed a similar level of confidence, promising that evidence existed which would support their claims. This raised new questions among spectators who wondered what exactly would surface once the case began. But until evidence is formally introduced into proceedings, everything remains speculation. Courts do not accept rumors. They accept documents, testimony, timelines, and verifiable facts. Many viewers appreciated that distinction. It reminded everyone that patience is essential, and that early assumptions often prove incomplete. When the day of the court appearance finally arrived, reporters gathered outside, but Stefon himself maintained a composed, reserved demeanor. He did not deliver emotional speeches or attempt to sway public opinion through dramatic gestures. His focus remained on the legal process. The influencer arrived separately, also quiet, allowing his attorney to speak on his behalf. Neither side sought attention. They allowed the system to guide the next steps. Such restraint suggested that both parties fully understood the seriousness of the moment. In situations involving sensitive and personal allegations, dignity becomes as important as strategy. Inside the courtroom, the session was brief and procedural. Dates were set, expectations were outlined, and both sides agreed to begin the exchange of materials necessary for the case to proceed. This phase, called discovery, is one of the most important parts of any legal dispute. It is where each side receives access to the other's information, where inconsistencies can be exposed, and where claims can be tested against evidence. For those observing the case from the outside, discovery is often the period where the truth begins to take shape, even before the trial begins. After the session ended, attorneys for each side delivered short remarks. Stefon's team reiterated their confidence that the accusations were baseless. The influencer's attorney repeated that his client was prepared to defend his account. Though nothing new was revealed publicly, the tone of both sides suggested readiness rather than hostility. This was no longer an online argument. It was a structured, formal conflict being handled through the appropriate channels. As the public began to absorb this development, many viewers wrote into USA CELEB expressing their thoughts. Some were relieved that the case would finally move forward. Others were anxious about what the truth might reveal. But almost everyone agreed on one point. The story had evolved far beyond gossip. It had become a matter of integrity, accountability, and human experience. People understood that at the heart of the case were two individuals whose lives would be shaped deeply by whatever the outcome turned out to be. The future of the case remains uncertain. It may proceed all the way to trial, or it may settle quietly behind closed doors. It may expose inconsistencies, or it may provide clarity that has been missing since the moment the first accusation was made. But no matter how it ends, the story reminds us that the online world does not operate in a vacuum. Words have consequences. Accusations matter. Reputations can be lifted or damaged in an instant. And only patience, truth, and accountability can reveal what lies behind the noise. For now, the world watches and waits, and USA CELEB will continue covering every new development with care, respect, and clarity, ensuring that our audience receives thoughtful updates rather than rushed assumptions. Thank you for following the story with us, and as always, stay tuned for more updates as the truth continues to unfold.